You're listening to Second Cut. This is the weekly podcast from FilmMagazine.com, where we explore topics in film theory and criticism through film reviews. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who saw 7 in theaters.
I see what you did there. I'm Sam. I am the one who ranks all 10 Saw films for the film magazine.
And I'm Kieran. I'm the one that did none of that, but is highly amused, remembering, I think, a line in the Mark Kermode book where he said the best joke he ever heard about Saw was people going, we've got four, what was it? We've got 4 for 5 in 6 at 7. I think it was. And that was the greatest thing about that particular Saw movie that they could come up with, which says a lot.
Well, God, Mark Kermode comes up so much. We should probably do an episode related to him. So we are going to do film scores next week. That was requested by viewer Greg. So shout out Greg. Yeah. But Sam is going to be going to a video game conference. So
with Greg.
With Greg. So we wanted to do something we could do quickly this week and before he leaves. So we're talking about Saw because...
And if I'm allowed to very quickly tie in the two episodes together, the newest Saw film, Saw X, which came out a week and a half ago, has just beaten John Williams' record for the... Charles Klauser, who scored it, the American composer who scored the most films in a single franchise with 10, beating John Williams, who did 9 Star Wars movies. So there you go. As a film score fact. Film Saw.
And you,
Saw score.
John Williams must be kicking himself if he'd only done Rogue One or Solo. He would still.
If he'd have done both,
Saw.
Still got.
Yeah, Saw. Yeah.
And you could go read Sam's review of Saw X. He wrote something that is in stark contrast to the way Kieran and I think about the film, but that's fine. We're talking about not those.
Yeah, basically, I liked it, and these guys had more issues than I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a debate for a comment section because we are not talking about that one. We're talking about 1, 3, Sam, 3, and 7.
3.
Yes, or 3D, or the final chapter, whatever you want to call it. So before we get into that, we wanted to discuss the genre of torture porn of it, the history of it, whether or not it actually exists. Kieran, I think you may have the best handle on this. What are sort of the origins of the torture porn film in horror film history?
I mean, is it just in film? I mean, like
specifically in film, not just in film.
I was going to say, if you go like the history of spectacle and violence in general, and moral degradations are now rapidly here. It's been going on for the past, centuries and millennia. Like, let's get rid of all the gladiator arena combat.
Yeah.
As if
let's skip over Bonnie and Clyde already exists. There's blood in movies. Go.
Okay, so you've had what? So we go on past stuff like Mario Bava, Blood and Black Lace. We're starting to get blood and stuff. Hammer are putting more stuff in. The 70s gets really explicit. Things like I Drink Your Blood are just like low budget tossing sausage meat around. The special effects artists, people like Bob Bottin and Rick Baker and Tom Savini come in the 70s and 80s. And then the thing that really is setting people off is around the turn of the century. When you get films like Saw, like Hostel, like Irreversible, like Vacancy, Severance, half of these I haven't seen. Apparently this is a new kind of thing of, oh my God, there's so much blood and violence everywhere. And the thing is, it's kind of always been there. It's just not been glossy with big billboard adverts down Times Square. Things like I Spit on Your Grave, Deliverance, realistically is just a torture porn. Deliverance is just wrong turn without the blood. That's all it is. The plot is exactly the same pretty much. And when you get to places like Japan, Audition in 99, I want to say the film was. The book was slightly earlier. Actually, the book
Yeah.
was less violent. Takashi Miike just went, sod it, there's one up.
Yeah, yeah, and Itchy the Killer probably has stuff in it that's so much more explicit than anything you've seen in any even the later Saw films.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
And then you get to 2008 in Japan, you get stuff like Tokyo Gore Police, which is just bonkers. I can't remember who did it. I'm fairly sure it wasn't Miike, but probably should have
no,
been.
yeah,
And even things like Tetsuo the Iron Man from in Japan in 1987, which is just ridiculous body parts is like interweaved with like mechanical wires and stuff that's just ridiculous. So like the violence has always been there. I mean, even things like, Friday the 13th, people getting their heads chopped off and, stuff through eyeballs. Friday the 13th Part 3 came out in 3D so that they could have, like, arrows going through people's heads and then coming out the back and shooting out into the cinema. Like, this was a thing. And, like, oh, now we put it on Saw 3D when it comes out in 2010. Apparently, it's new levels of moral degradation. Decades ago. Shut up. I think what's happened is there was just such a cultural shift at that point. And I think especially the slasher flicks have been going for a while, since kind of Scream and, going in the neo slashers. I know what we did last summer, Cherry Falls, Urban Legend, stuff like that. That suddenly the focus on body parts getting cut off for whatever reason, which became one of the focus points, at least aesthetically, of these films. I'm not saying it's the purpose of, but it's one of the focus points aesthetically of it in such a, an effective way. Suddenly, everyone's up in arms. Apparently, forgetting the video nasties that were years ago, and we've been through this before. It just keeps going in cycles, really.
So, Sam, you posed the question to us right before the show started. Does torture porn exist? I mean, what brought on that question for you? Why do you wonder that?
well, I don't know if as a subgenre it asks anything particularly more of an audience than any other horror film does. It's just a different kind of spectacle, really. It's like just. I don't think it's any different from jumping at a ghost face, just appearing on screen all of a sudden with loud noise. It's we're just reacting to, I suppose, something more tangible, more kind of relatable to our own experiences. You think it's like, most people, would say, if you don't believe in ghosts, well, a ghost isn't actually going to jump out and attack me. But in theory, a mad person could strap me to a chair and chop my fingers off. It's and the more realistic those kind of effects and kind of the stresses and the kind of the torment like the victims are put through, the more you can kind of feel that. I mean, yeah, you're just reacting to a different kind of stimulation and just. You're looking for you're still looking for a visceral reaction in the audience, just to possibly get to a slightly different kind of stimulus.
Well, do you think torture porn applies to Saw in the sort of general understanding of torture porn as the resident ranker?
Probably not the first one, but yeah, and debatably not for the 2 and 3 as well. They're still kind of, because I think they're still trying to they're telling like an overarching plot, and kind of there's other elements. There's like crime procedural elements and kind of murder mystery kind of stuff going on. But probably after that, they're just inventing more scenarios to kind of present to you like a more elaborate kind of setup for these, these traps. Put bodies through like these. Basically like mince machines by that point. I mean, torture porn I think just arose basically just by critics who didn't particularly like the kinds of films they were, and it's as a derogatory term, really. I mean, it's sort of been embraced since. It's like, fans of those kind of horror films, it's almost been reclaimed. But I think to start with, it was to put it down and just think, oh, you're disgusting. Why would you want to watch something like this? You're only taking pleasure in seeing people being hurt horribly. So I think it has kind of changed over the time. Kind of these films, in particular in American cinema, have been around, really.
Kieran, what do you think of the question of does it exist, and is Saw torture porn or something else?
I mean, the first one, I would argue, definitely not. And if you're going to say torture porn, then you've got to apply it to a whole host of things, which is ridiculous. You know, are we going to say all the Hellraisers are torture porn? I mean, the first one is very graphic. You know, literally the opening scenes are him piecing together bits of somebody's face. You know, and that's the opening of it. And Clive Barker was an absolute master. Anyway, I don't personally think it exists, and definitely not now, because I think if anyone goes that far, they almost subconsciously, I think, realize they're going to get labeled as torture porn, so they'll try and add stuff in so they can go, look, there's themes and ideas and symbolism in here, in order to defend themselves. And if they're not, they should be doing it, because they know that they're going to get labeled that. And the first Saw, I mean, the first Saw is the story of it is fairly hilarious. To go into it.
It's a lot more police procedural than.
It is, and essentially what it was.
Sorry, but before you get too far into the first Saw, since that is your movie, I do want to give kind of the maybe not widely accepted, but an accepted academic look at what torture porn is. So it is explicitly American. So although the first Saw is an Australian movie from two Australian filmmakers, it takes place in America, stars American actors.
Funded by Americans. It's an American film that just happens to have an Australian director and producer.
Yeah. And it emerged out of the post 9/11 anxieties for Saw in particular. It was influenced by the atmosphere brought on by the Iraq War. That's something Lee Wannell or James Wan, one of them, explicitly discussed that. There's an emphasis on the reality, real bodies, and the real ways in which torture is enacted upon the body. So instead of like being shot with a gun, and of course this is a typical thing in slashers too, it's a lot more visceral, a lot more personal and intimate, the way in which the machinery, the tools are used to tear bodies apart. I
think even the Joker says something similar in The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't use a gun, so what are we doing?
There's an emphasis on abduction, specifically as a method of acquiring victims. So while nowhere may be safe in the slasher, you know, they're in suburban America. That's the typical, you know, safe place in the world, and there's Michael Myers. Well, in Saw, you know, you get into your car and there's a pig mask person there to take you. So that in that specific way, abduction is a motif within the stories. There's license for retribution, whether from the killer or the killed, or victim or victimizer. And Saw in particular, it's interesting the way that we're put into the sort of space of the torturer and asked to empathize with him, and sort of see from his perspective throughout a series of films that don't always involve him. The flashbacks are a motif within the films considered torture porn. And then I think the other big one is the sort of human, what are the things, the three in medieval medicine? It was the bile, the blood, and whatever else.
Humors.
The humors.
The
yes.
humor.
The color palette is specifically related to the humors, and you know, the black bile, the piss and blood and all that. It's just gross. And finally,
I mean, the first Saw is a very blue film, isn't it? And Saw 3 is a very yellow film.
Yeah.
Saw 2 is very green.
The final point is they're shot pornographically. So there's the mid shot to establish what is going on. There may be a crane shot that shows us around the room, and then we gradually pull in until there's the money shot, which is blood in this scenario. I think in Hostel specifically, Eli Roth called a certain eye shot where like milky substance comes out of the eye, an eyegasm. So it is a sort of intentional thing by the directors, if not just sort of intuitive in terms of how you go about shooting those things. And Kieran, you may be able to speak a little bit more to that. But tell us about Saw 1 and what you think of it and what you wrote about it for Saw 1 half 0.5.
Yeah. Something I wrote about it when COVID hit and I had to essentially they changed our assignments for my MA producing degree. One of them was essentially all about how you turn a concept film into a feature. And so I used Saw 0.5 as one of my point of reference. And that was a concept film. Well, what a concept film is, for those who don't know, is essentially sometimes you have especially if you're kind of newer to the industry, maybe there's a very, very no budget kind of directorial credit to your name. And you go forward with a film pitch, but you want to kind of shoot a small film essentially to show to the producers this is the kind of thing that you could do along the same lines. So Vincenzo Natali also did a short film called Elevated as a concept short for his film Cube, which is now very widely regarded. And actually, that's got some fairly graphic moments as well. And that came out in '97. And that was again, it was the idea of that one was to shoot it all inside an elevator to essentially give the idea of what you could do in a small space, which was essentially the Cube, because it's all just in boxy rooms. Saw 0.5, they had the thing for Saw, and you've got these two Australian students, or kind of recently graduated, who want to make a film, and they have no money. So apparently they're just constantly discussing, well, how do we have two people trapped in a room for the entire film, because that is the easiest thing we can do with no money. And apparently one day after a phone call, I think it was Lee Wannell, just kind of scribbled on a notepad and wrote the word Saw with blood dripping from it, and just went, that's it, that's what we're calling it. But yeah, so most of Saw, as we know for the first one, is just them trapped in a room. It's Carrie Elwes and Lee Wannell, because they essentially said, we want one of us to be acting in it, and it was the one not holding the camera.
Huge gig to get Carrie Elwes, by the way.
I know, and like the amount of the people that got in this, and Donald Glover as well, isn't it? So they must have been on a downswing, because the Saw 1 was made for 1 million.
And I mean the addition of Danny Glover at least does make this very low budget indie film feel like a real movie, doesn't it? It's like you got a genuine movie star in this, you know.
And he's not too old for that shit somehow.
Yeah, not like I've worked on films that have done that. Anyway, I shouldn't say anything. Anyway, yeah. So they eventually get the script to Lionsgate. Was it Lionsgate? Lionsgate distributed it. I'm not sure if they produced it as well. And they eventually start making it. And again, like, you know, 60% of it is just them in a room because they have no money. And it was shot in about 21 days. And one of the reasons it looks kind of as gritty or as grimy as it does is because they had no time to get really nice, polished shots. They just had to get in there and get out. Yeah. And having worked on a film with a schedule of 20 days, I know it's just, there's just no time. You just get in, you get shots, you move out again as quickly as you can. And, you know, they went through stuff where it's not all perfect. The Saw one is not perfect. There's a shot at one point of I think it's when Donald Glover's character and his partner, whose names I've forgotten, kind of go into the building looking at a jigsaw, and there's a shot where it opens, the door opens, and it's about halfway down. You just see their legs walking in, and apparently people at the time went, "Oh, that's a really nice creative shot," and that wasn't the case. That was a reshoot, and that's actually Lee Wannell walking in, who's meant to be chained up in a bathroom halfway across town. So the reason that it's shot like that is because they can't show his face. So there's stuff like that. Apparently they went through, they shot the whole film. They had like a rough edit, and James Wan put his head in his hand and, oh my God, I've made a PG-13 teen flick. So they went back in and added a couple of more shots of blood. So I think when in the reverse bear trap scene where she's digging through the entrails, one or two more shots of that were then added in because he didn't think it was visceral. The whole thing is it's a thriller with bits of blood in. It's not meant to be blood and guts ripped off or anything. And realistically, as people have noticed or noted in academia, realistically, everyone remembers the first one for one shot, which is the saw going onto the leg. which is somebody pointed out, I think, is there for about 2 seconds, and you don't see very much of it. There's a couple of lines of blood, and that's it. There's more blood and kind of horror in the other sections. I, it's not the main focus of it. So the first Saw really is not that much of a torture porn film, even by the standards of the films that come later, and it is a very effective, very good thriller. And I would give, like, when they go, oh, if you could go back in time, what would you do? In probably one of my top 10 film things is I want to go back in time to its first screening at Sundance. It was 2004, because I want to see people's faces for that reveal, because that rug pull is one of the best executed rug pulls, I think, in possibly cinematic history, if not modern cinema. It's ridiculously good and ridiculously effective. The trouble is that every film since then has to do it.
Yeah, and since it debuted at Sundance, I'd want to go back in time and be in that room and watch Robert Redford's face as that came on the screen. See if he was swept on by it, and see if he kind of got it. That would be interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, the editing in the first one hides a multitude of sins, I think. I mean, it's one more distinct things about the franchise. Kevin Gruter's editing. Obviously he went on, to direct, the 6th, 7th, and Saw X eventually. But he's the franchise main editor, and he pioneered that kind of shaky, kind of how he sped up kind of editing style, and which does kind of help smooth over the edges and kind of add a certain kind of visceral kind of energy to the whole thing.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Jacob, I would very much argue the first one is not a torture porn, even if you're going to apply that label. It's not that bloody. Yes, there are a couple of moments, but no more so than anything that's gone before. Yes, there are films with less, but it's very much an homage to or inspired by things like Seven, and actually even the ending of things like The Abominable Dr. Fives from '68 with Vincent Price in it, where there's a scene where a character has to essentially perform an operation quickly on a character before some corrosive acid runs down and drips onto somebody and kills him, something like that. I can't remember the exact scenario years ago, but it's very much a Saw kind of do this quickly or you die kind of situation before I make your choice. So yes, it's got its moments, and yes, it's very visceral, but it's not all the blood and guts that went into later installments of the franchise. So at least in terms of the first one, and definitely the Saw 0.5, which is very amateurish, and it's essentially the reverse bear trap scene that they made, and their police kind of detective is just somebody in a shirt, and there's a really low budget it's a fold up table shoved against a wall of some kind of, obviously like an office building kind of thing, with a mug of coffee, as a blank white china mug, and not very well acted. And I think it might have even been James Wan getting knocked out, and there's a shot it hits him, he goes, what was that a shot? It's not the greatest. The reverse bear trap scene is well done, but most of the rest, it literally just thrown up. It took them about 2 days apparently to shoot it, and they just went to get it on. So it was incredibly low budget. It's $1 million. That's nothing. Even then, it's just nothing to shoot a movie. And it was a get in, get out. We've managed to make a film, and the fact it has done what it has done is a testament to the skill of the people who worked on it.
Yeah. All right, Sam, go ahead.
By the way, the original Saw is number 2 on my ranking. Guess what number 1 is? Oh, would you look at that? Is what I'm talking about. My favorite of the whole series, and for me the best Saw film, is Saw 3, which kind of brought the initial trilogy, which you could argue was one continuous kind of story, kind of a full character arc for John Kramer, brought that to a close. And again, it's like the set piece in this is kind of more elaborate. It is kind of verging on that kind of torture porn kind of area now, I would say, if you're going to go with that descriptor. But I think there's quite by the standards of the Saw franchise, there's a fair bit of kind of heart and emotion to this one, I'd say. It's probably might stretching it a little, but I'd say it's probably the most human of the Saw films. You actually do feel kind of the human cost, of kind of these people and kind of what they're being put through in this one, because essentially it's got Saw's, it's got Jigsaw's apprentice Amanda forcing a doctor to keep him alive long enough for him to finish his witnessing of all the games he's set up, and a dad looking for his for his child, and it's all these kind of torn apart kind of family units basically being manipulated and forced to kind of look at himself in the mirror, and I kind of see kind of Amanda and John Kramer as a bit of a weird kind of dysfunctional family themselves. I do love kind of films like a twisted kind of family dynamic. They're sort of like, I think she sort of sees him as like a father figure, but may also be in love with him sexually as well. It's all a bit up in the air, a bit wrong, but I mean, I think the thing is about it, you can kind of see that Lee Whannell James Wan kind of wanted to tie things up in this one, kind of like basically almost tie up most of the loose ends and kind of giving their main character essentially like a definitive ending, because spoiler, he does die in this one and die definitively. I mean, he was going to die of cancer anyway, but just to make sure that there's no coming back from it, so they kill him with a circular a power saw as well. Yes, Jigsaw gets killed by a saw.
No coming back, not counting flashbacks.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's why there's even more lengthy flashbacks with him in every subsequent installment, and it gets increasingly more kind of hard to kind of suspend your disbelief that he had forethought and he did so much in this like last few months of his life.
And finally,
like,
the films themselves become flashbacks, essentially.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
up to Jigsaw, which is all takes place in between Saws 1 and 2. I mean, so I don't know with this. I think it's possibly verging on possibly Torchborn, this one, because it is very much setting up this situation, to watch these kind of, like I say, increasingly kind of elaborate kind of methods of kind of bodily destruction. I mean, there's some particularly nasty ones in this one. I mean, think of the one of the woman being hung naked in a freezer and being squirted with water until she basically becomes an ice, like a human popsicle, basically.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that's a nice one. This one does have my absolute favourite of the saw traps in the whole series. And it's not one that actually involves bodily mutilation. It's a more ironic, fun version of that, and it's basically a corrupt judge in a vat and having rotten pig carcasses kind of minced and the slurry kind of dumped on top of him, so he essentially drowns in it. I just I like they kind of went down a slightly different route for that one. So
Yeah.
it was after this one basically they'd almost written themselves into a corner because they kind of concluded the story, but then the series was still making truckloads of money. So they thought, all right, so how can we continue this? And I said that they kind of went on the flashback aspect, more and more, and kind of, what we didn't tell you last time was John Kramer actually planned this. Or what we didn't tell you was one of his apprentices was just off screen. That scene you saw like a few films ago. If you just moved the camera slightly a bit further, you'd have seen they were there all along and they'd planned all this. And then basically from then on, it is kind of setting up just right. We'll just bring together like a group of characters you don't really care about, and we'll turn them into human jerky, basically, in a variety of kind of clever ways. I mean, I think that they're the more effective kind of Saw installments are either ones where at least one of the victims is semi-sympathetic, like in Saw 3, Angus McFadden's kind of character. He's obviously a terrible dad, but he's kind of I think he does have regrets about that. He's a flawed, kind of interesting kind of human being, and he almost wants him to kind of get through us and kind of come out on top in the end. And like saying the sixth one, he's going after like all these like horrible kind of big pharma types and health insurance people, and he obviously blames for kind of his situation, like lots of situations of lots of others, someone what to do in Sorex. But yeah, generally speaking, like from kind of sort of 4 onwards, yeah, it's basically just we'll dream up a new scenario, have all these people in a room and unable to escape, and obviously the traps themselves after John Kramer's gone, that they are basically there's no way out of them. I mean, if we're being serious, probably 80% of Jigsaw's traps there's probably no way out of them. Really, he says there is, but could you really force yourself to do what he's asking you to do?
I've always loved the fact that all the traps after like the first one, you get about 5 minutes max. Normally, 3 is the regular, and the first one, the whole point was they had to have you trapped in a room for a load of hours, and it's the least elaborate of all of them. It's like, oh, you get an entire day. All you have to do is cut through your foot or shoot that guy. That's it. And I'm going to give you about 9 hours to decide with a load of clues. It's literally just because they needed people in the room for so long.
And then you have like in Saw 2, which is like we'll take a group this time. We'll put them in a big horror house full of all these different challenges that they've got.
Well, apparently Saw 2 was actually just a different script that was floating around. That essentially after the premiere, they've got similar ideas, but after kind of the debut weekend of the first one, Lionsgate turned around and went, "Okay, we're taking your script and we're rejigging it to work with Saw."
I mean that does have quite a bit in horror, doesn't it? I mean, take away John Kramer and can make it a bit more sci-fi, and so it's essentially like Cube, isn't it? It's like very.
I mean, I've always said, there was there's an alternate timeline when somehow the script for Inception ended up at New Line, and they took Mal out of it, put Freddy Krueger in, and suddenly it's a New Elm Street installment, which I think actually is an edit I would pay to see.
Well, and speaking of the differences there between 1 and 2, Kieran, can you tell me some of the tropes that are established in 1 that do stick across each of the films, such as like the game being set up, having to follow rules?
Yeah, I mean, there are things like, there's a specific set of rules, and normally John Kramer puts a little bit of wordplay in there.
Yes. It's always a very ironic kind of speech, and kind of usually the traps are kind of thematically linked to kind of their perceived sin in his eyes.
I'll tell you one thing that doesn't go across. I can't remember if it's in past the first one, which is the idea that the whole reason he's called the Jigsaw Killer is he's apparently cutting out little jigsaw pieces from the flesh of his victims. Does that go? I can't remember that going.
No.
So I think that's only shown in the first one, and it's only referenced in the second one. Where he says like I always hated that name. That was the name the press gave me. So.
Yeah. Well, stop cutting
it does not
jigsaw
exist in 7 at all.
Yeah, like this is apparently not a thing. I mean, half the time the bodies are so badly mangled that you can't do anything with it anyway. The woman in Saw 3, you'd have to defrost her first.
I'm surprised they didn't lean into that more heavily in the sequels, when he kind of increasingly focused on like John Kramer's apprentices, who are a lot less kind of morally scrupulous than he is. So you think they'd want to embrace like the kind of the psycho serial killer kind of side of kind of their kind of shared kind of legacy. They probably want to emphasize that, but apparently not.
And I mean, there's also a thing of Jigsaw likes to watch his games, and yes, you do get a lot of cameras, but then around 5, I think there's some stuff where there's just a like we play the tape and then everything else kind of vanishes. I also want to know why some people get actually like Billy the Puppet appearing on a screen, and sometimes you don't. I don't know. Did he just run out of TVs and decide, okay, we're going to have to go for a Play Me tape? Why is it when we get to 2009, we're still using tapes? Is he not got a CD player, an MP3 player? Oh, press characters on the phone, like, come on, get with the times. Yeah, there's some stuff which is established, and obviously the whole detective plot stuff is there, which is not there in the newest.
But think about it. If, say, the first Saw's obviously 2004, we'll say that actually is set in 2004. But then the next two are probably set like in the next like few weeks, you know. So that's like we're still in 2004 at that point. So
Which means the Jigsaw and Saw X are set.
Even though yeah. I mean, if the series kind of they release like one a year at Halloween for like close to a decade, but I don't think the time progresses in that kind of in real time. I still think it's probably like only over like a couple of years max. I theorize, but anyway, I'm just making an excuse for the kind of the retro technology. Look, it was a big defender of like old-fashioned physical media. Was John Kramer? You know, he just wanted to use all his bank tapes up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing that does start going on, just finish off, is the fact that they keep having to make it more convoluted, which means they keep having to kind of semi-retcon anything they've done in the previous installments, which is really the reason you go and watch Saw, which is what absolutely convoluted way are they going to try and do a new rug pull?
I mean, the other big hallmark, is the rug pull, is the big twist in like the last couple of minutes of each film. And I would say, obviously, the best is the first one, and then the second two have both got decent ones, and then the one in Jigsaw is really good, but the rest
Jigsaw is good.
The rest are usually just, oh, okay, all right, well, that was I kind of got there was something about that going on, and you've just confirmed that. Okay, whatever. And they always play that same music sting, you know, from the first film,
which is I think possibly the most iconic piece of horror music from the 21st century. Yeah. It is glorious, like 3 notes, and suddenly everybody knows what is going on. It's one of the most recognizable pieces of music in modern horror.
I would take Insidious's screechy strings as more iconic, but
I have no idea what the score for Insidious is. Haven't a clue. I've seen the first 3. I haven't seen the newest one.
Dissonance and violins.
There's an actual score, probably a piece of music. Come on, and it's an overture. Come on, yeah.
So the questions of technology and when these films take place actually lead pretty well into Saw 3D, because in that movie we do see people with, now I may be wrong in saying this, but I'm pretty sure smartphones filming the opening movie's trap.
Yes, I'd actually forgotten that. So this is the in the shop window, isn't it? The two guys.
Yes.
In full view of the street. Yeah.
So
I forgot. You're probably right then.
The generous reading of the opening trap of Saw 3D is that it's showing the self-awareness of the filmmaking team in the spectatorship and the commoditization of the Saw films themselves, and it's sort of a microcosm of us watching it and our disgust, but continuing to watch it and being unable to intervene. And then, of course, the more likely reading, more likely answer, and my reading is that they just wanted to put an exciting, titillating saw trap in the opening where a girl is sliced open, and she specifically is the sexually promiscuous figure from like the Jason movie. She needs to be punished for the fact that she had relations with one of those guys in the other one's bed 2 days before. You really want to save this B word, is what they say as they slice her up together. Which really brings to light this film's sort of weird relations with gender in a way that doesn't exist in the other Saw films.
It is kind of disconcerting, isn't it? I mean, FYI, Saw 3D is second to bottom on my ranking. Only Saw 4. Yeah, Saw 4 is lower on my list. I mean, this is it is gimmicky, and I don't think it really kind of works out. I mean, again, this was yet another film that was probably meant to be sort of like a like a bit of a series finale, but it obviously it didn't
Hence, it's
end up
called the
that way.
final chapter.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. Yeah.
and that,
But the number of horror franchises that have had a film called The Final Chapter and then have gone on.
Friday's had 2.
so
Yeah.
with Saw specifically, this is from a San Diego Comic-Con 2009 preview panel. I think the director of the sixth one, to paraphrase, the sixth one was supposed to be the last one. You know, with Jill Tuck, the wife of John Kramer, who is Jigsaw, putting the reverse bear trap onto Hoffman to test him. And by the way, Hoffman is Jigsaw in 5 and 6, 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6.
Yes, he's a detective who had been
4,
tracking.
5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Ongoing.
Well, no, in 7 it's Dr. Gordon. So 7 is sort of Hoffman's comeuppance as he has become an evil figure within this story, doing Jigsaw the wrong way. And so 7 then becomes its own finale, and what this plays into in the genre of torture porn, or subgenre, whatever you want to call
Splatter movies, whatever you're gonna.
it relates to the way that the war on terror is ongoing and never ending. And so narratively, it becomes about, okay, well, how is the next movie going to retcon and continue the legacy? You know, we have mission accomplished. Jigsaw is dead. George Bush is standing up there on the platform after, I don't know what happened. I don't know what mission accomplished was. I don't know the context of him standing there. But very obviously, we are still fighting in the Middle East in a few various fronts, and that is never going to stop. They will continue to take away our rights until it ends.
And as further proof of that, we have had 3 subsequent Saw films, none of which are actually sequels.
Nope.
So, and you're talking about technology, thinking about it. Jigsaw, which, spoiler no spoiler, takes place well earlier in the franchise than you initially think it does by the release date.
Because the bad guy in that, well, the surprise bad guy in that turns out to have been Jigsaw's first apprentice, even before Amanda.
Yeah, although apparently even back then they have access to lasers.
So
yeah,
the iconic part of that. So that's right back early on there. Spiral is a story of a copycat killer, which is a one-off that we've got no inkling that they're going to do another one too anyway. And Saw X takes place between 1 and 2. So, you know, realistically still, Saw 7, the final chapter, is still the final chapter.
Well, and for this one, in relation to 6, Sam, you talked about 6 being the, like, we're getting back at Big Pharma, which, I mean, I don't think that's a terrible thematic thing to do. It sort of makes sense, even though it's elaborately plotted to an almost ridiculous level.
Yeah.
But
Tobin Bell de-ages about 30 years by just wearing his cap backwards.
Saw that's in Saw 7. I don't know if it's in 6 too, but Saw 7 he has the cap backwards. Saw 7 focuses on a guy who claims to have been in a saw trap, writes a whole book about it, becomes famous. He has this acronym, SURVIVE, which I can read that whole thing out if you want, but it doesn't really matter.
Same time.
But I mean that was just a genuinely interesting kind of aspect of the film that they basically did nothing with. You know, this idea that, fake or not, kind of with ulterior motives or not, to have this idea of a Jigsaw survivors group. I think that's a fantastic idea, and then they proceed just to do absolutely nothing with it, just completely.
Well, they probably will do in an eventual sequel, which will end up being Saw 16, because the others will be set before Saw 1, and a spin-off, and then it'll be. I want to see a time travel to have, like, I don't know, Saw in, like, feudal Japan or something like that. I want to see a lot of developments go in feudal Japan, Predator in feudal Japan. That'd be great.
Well, the whole movie for 7, it's based around that guy's vanity. You know, he was watching the news and he saw a Saw victim, and he was like, well, I could do that and make lots of money. And so he did, and he made a lot of money. and he and his wife, who is sort of the Princess Peach at the end of the Mario game, she is at the end of the Saw game that he is going through, and he needs to go save her. She does not know that he lied, but all of the people along the way, each of the levels that he goes through, they do know about the lie, and each of them participated in a particular way. They go with the see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, like, I don't know, whatever trope, but it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, really, because each of them is not seeing, speaking, or hearing, or they are hearing. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense at all. But that's what they decided to go with. And here's Rotten Tomatoes' summary of the movie. The critic consensus. It's a 9% on there, by the way. Sloppily filmed, poorly acted, and illogically plotted, Saw 3D leaves viewers trapped in the most lackluster installment of the series. And what I think is particularly silly about it is the attempt to try and do the police procedural aspect of it. So the guy playing the game, that part is what it is. It's sort of a rote resuscitation of the other movies. It is 100% going through the motions. I don't care one bit about any of the people involved in it. The hook of it is okay, but the story itself, incredibly unengaging, and gets even worse with the police part, because the poor guy playing Gibson, Chad Dinella, he was apparently a good stage actor in Canada. He is not a good screen actor in this film. He delivers lines to Jill Tuck like he was forced to at gunpoint, where he's like, I need to get you into witness protection. And the writing of it doesn't do him any favors, but his delivery is just so bad. It's, of course, the big return of Carrie Elwes. How do you say his name?
Elwes.
Whatever. The dude from Princess Bride. He is back as Dr. Gordon, and that's the big twist. The big twist is he's been Jigsaw's secret apprentice all along, and he has to protect Jill, and that's his whole thing. And so
and I think the theory is they need someone medical on hand, for like the more kind of complex, kind of invasive kind of trap setups. Anything which needs an eye removing or something like that.
Yeah, and they show him going through and doing each of those, like sewing people's eyes shut and putting keys behind their eyes and stuff like that. The eye stuff in particular, it seems important to have a doctor. But he's not really a character in it. He shows up once at the survivors group to be like, well, I'm here as foreshadowing. And then at the end, he reveals himself to Hoffman. And so that's what the police part is concerned with, is we got to catch Hoffman. But there's this one part where all of these racists are tortured, like neo-Nazis or something, and they all die. Yeah, and it's another spectacle thing where we're just like, oh my God, that's so crazy and cool. Whoa, bro, we get to enjoy these people dying because they're racist. But
I'm fairly sure that actually came about because Linkin Park just said it could be in a Saw movie, so they wrote that just have Linkin Park in a Saw movie. That's the only reason it exists.
I had zero idea it was them, so that is pretty pointless if you don't know what they look like. What it ends up doing is nothing for the movie. They say, surely this links somehow to the plot of this film. That is almost a verbatim quote. It does not. It never comes back in any way. Hoffman is...
I forgot it existed until you said it.
Hoffman is elaborately stalking the police in ridiculous ways, and so like he sees them in a junkyard solving the murder, and so he presses a button to make something explode, and then finally he sneaks into the police station to kill all of the police, and it gets in through a body bag. He kills all the police, and then he kills Jill Tuck with the reverse bear trap, and we get to see her like wide open mouth and tongue. Surely there was some dumb 3D within all of that, of like blood spurt or something. There's a lot of the 3D shots, by the way, that you go, this isn't like impactful unless it's in 3D if you're just watching it on your normal TV screen. The traps that the dude goes through, the fake Jigsaw guy, so they torture his publicist. Her thing is she has to be quiet, or these needles are going to pierce her throat. And every time it goes above a whisper, the needles get closer. Well, he's pulling a fishhook key out of her mouth. And so the whole time she's screaming, and then the needles stab her in the throat. Completely inescapable, surely. The next one is he has to stab himself in the side by lifting up this thing, and it's going to stop the electrical circuit to stop her slowly rotating forward and her eyes and mouth being stabbed.
Which I just on that, I always thought that is a very slight nod to Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters, where there is a scene where a zombie grabs somebody's head and drags it slowly towards a splinter of wood sticking out towards you at the screen. I don't know, but it's such an iconic thing of just the cutting back and forth to like the POV going slowly forward that I choose to think it is a nod.
I think it must be, yeah.
It very well could be, but let's don't give them too much credit. I think
considering I think Charlie Klauser said that when he was scoring the first one, he didn't really know horror movies, whereas James Wan and Lee Wannell could reference I think he specifically mentioned in an interview somewhere or some documentary, specifically mentioned they could reference like obscure 70s Italian horror movies. So considering that's in there, I'm going to assume it's in there because they were still producing it, even though they weren't writing it after Saw 3. But
I don't think they did actually produce this one. They're not listed on the produced by. I think their last involvement was with 6. So what
you've got to ask yourself is Lee Wannell and James Wan maybe would have referenced Fulci, but do you think Kevin Grutert would have?
Well, and I think the worst part of that trap, those shots specifically, is that in 3D the thing is coming towards your face and we're literally in her POV. In 2D it's just a flat shot of little circles. Like it's incredibly stupid. And the final one, before the big finale, the next to last Minion one, where we get to just watch someone die and go, yay, death, is a guy is blinded and he has to, with eye cover, he's not actually blinded, that would be better, and he has to cross planks above a height. And then his friend has to guide him and then get the key to him to unlock the thing. Even so, they get him to a point. He tosses him the key and it falls to the ground. And we're like, no. Well, they're like, no. And we're like, yay, people die.
I mean, it goes with the whole trend of nobody in the Saw movies can throw anything. If you think about the first one, where they're throwing things across that bathroom, they never get a decent throw.
Nobody in the Saw film can do anything unless they are a main character who is allowed
unless
to advance.
Unless the plot calls for it.
Yeah, they're completely unable to do anything. This guy in particular throws it, goes right through his hands, and then the guy is hanged. And so he's like, oh, well, okay, my friend's dead. Move on to the next room. And the next room is really the only kind of emotionally impactful thing because it's his wife, and he has to do the fake trap that he said he was in, where he had to put hooks through his pectorals, pull himself up, attach wires that would... I guess it's not set up exactly that way. What he has to do is attach wires that will release his wife from her restraints and the electrified fence around her. And if he doesn't within the allotted time, by the way, for that last trap, even if they had gotten the key to the guy with that throw perfectly, there was no time for him to undo it because there was 2 seconds left before he was hanged. So pointless, stupid.
Again, you wonder what would have happened if they'd have given him like 5 hours, like in the first film.
But as we've previously established, at this point, it's Hoffman setting the traps, and he doesn't care if they escape or not. He's not at. He's just there for the.
This one is Gordon, so Gordon is doing it the right way, surely.
Oh, okay.
So
because they can technically escape.
That's a big distinction between Hoffman does all of the bad traps, but Hoffman is sort of the vigilante fighting with the police, and Gordon is the actual Jigsaw watching the VHS tapes that are notably different in character to the digital filmmaking. Like, they could have put a film grain or something on it, but no, it's so clinical. And then we see the videotape pop up in videotape, form, and it's so jarring, the visual difference. But finally, he has to pull himself up. He gets right there, and instead of like wrapping the thing he needs around his wrist in order to make sure he is attached to that thing, his chest breaks and he falls. His wife is put into this oven contraption that apparently exists in an insane house or whatever they're in. They say where it's located. The police show up, and then instead of it taking place in the past, or them getting shot with a shotgun, they get shot with gas. Gas like falls into a container, and it says like, you shouldn't have come in here, and they all die from a gas attack. And also Hoffman set up this machine gun trap that gunned down Gibson, the main cop, and all of the other good guy cops. So that's how they all perish and are unable to stop the woman from being burned to death in the oven. The innocent person, not the person who lied, the person who is completely innocent, had no knowledge. Instead of her being safe and the other guy dying, she dies.
I mean, this is one of the other trends that gets more and more prevalent throughout the series, although it is in the first one, which is that people in the traps quite often have to choose between themselves and somebody else, or choose which of somebody else will die, which is kind of like, what did they do? Like in the first one, Amanda's got the dead cellmate, which, okay, admittedly is out of prison for whatever reason. But then you get things, is it like Saw 6, I think, before the shotgun carousel, where you've got the two people on the rope, and one of them's like a mother and one of them's fairly old that won't be missed or something. It's like, there's no mention of, I don't know, are they both growing weed? Like, are they like, is the old lady used to be like running like a Yakuza or something? Nothing, just people like grabbed off the streets. Hey, you're going to be in a saw trap, you might live. What have I done? No reason. It is a little bit stupid, that. And I'd like to point out that trap is actually impossible. Because they said right at the end, you should know if you'd actually done this trap, that it is physically impossible to lift yourself by those muscles and hold on. So he couldn't have achieved it anyway. And so realistically, what you're doing is you're just condemning a woman to death who has done nothing wrong. Straight up out of the blue. Welcome to Saw 7, and I would only say for at least the sequels, admittedly, Lionsgate did have a thing where one comes out every year. You do not have that much time to refine everything.
For 7, they were taking like concepts that were already existing that didn't get used, and they were like, well, we'll just throw this one in there. Maybe that's why they had to kind of force the see no evil here. Who knows? Who has any idea? The big thing with 7 for the larger narrative is we find out that Gordon's Jigsaw, he captures Hoffman and he locks him in the bathroom. We see his foot. We see Lee Wannell's dead body. We probably see the other guy from 2 that's dead in there. A lot of dead bodies.
No, he was taken out. It was, and he died in 4 finally, didn't he?
Thank you.
He gets killed in the ending of 4.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was the guy on the block of ice, wasn't he?
Yep.
Well, good. There we go. We know he was saved, but we see Lee Wannell's dead body, and we see the foot. And
because fan service, oh my god, it's back to the original.
And of course, it has
been going for 6 years.
It has to come full circle, just like the last movie did the reverse bear trap full circle. Well, this one's the bathroom full circle. Surely now the story is done, and there will not be any more Saw movies, and we're gonna have another crazy 3D effect at the end. I mean, it's stupid. It's built on a visual gimmick that was probably dated by the time it came out, because it had been a full year since Avatar. It was just trying to get on the trend. And the acting is bad. The story is weak. There's probably 3 actors that you can name in it. And Tobin Bell is in one scene, and he is credited like top billed. And it's the one where he has the backwards hat, and he goes, "Sign it, John. H, no H. I don't care." You know what, buddy? there are people in the world that lie. Maybe he tells a story. Oh, it was in ancient Egypt when you put a story on the public record. That was if you were found to be lying, you'd be sent to the quarry. You know what that means? You'd be enslaved. And the guy's like, what are you implying? That you're going to kidnap me and put me in a saw trap, and that I'm bullshitting all of this because you're Saw?
Yeah.
And he goes, put up my hood, run away. And that's it. It's super dumb. It is easily the worst of these movies. Sam, I don't know how you thought 4 was less bad than or worse than this one.
I think it's possibly just the mark kind of drop off in quality from 3 to 4 really kind of just shook me, to be honest. But yeah, this one is bad. I've just realised something, Jacob. We've missed an opportunity with this. You should have been wearing that cap backwards throughout this whole thing.
There we go. Well, I'm supporting
He's 20 years younger.
He's turned into Ash Ketchum. He's now 10 years old.
My baseball team's playoff game is tonight. They're trying to eliminate the Orioles, so this is in support of them. All right.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we're not even discussing Spiral very much, which is an interesting case, which is very much trying to almost. There's still the kind of formula in there, but it's very much more on the police procedural side.
Yeah.
Probably like since the first one, nobody's done it as much on that. Very much focused on Chris Rock's character and Samuel L. Jackson, who I still think was only in there because somebody said, "Hey, do you want to be in a Saw movie? You get to call Jigsaw a mother." And he went, "Yes, I will do it." That's the only reason he's in there. Didn't see a script or anything. But yeah, on the sequels, we can go on all the academic theory. I read an article. I've got one up here by Dean Lockwood from 2009. He's a professor at the University of Lincoln. The article's called "All Stripped Down: The Spectacle of Torture Porn." So you can go find that if you want. And he references some academic theories on the idea of control. And in the wake of the War on Terror and kind of around the turn of the century, all these electronic ways of surveillance were coming in. And so the idea of being trapped in these kind of torture porn, even things like hostel and things like that, is reflective of the new way that, society is trying to control and restrict our movements and be constantly watching like Big Brother, like Jigsaw's constantly watching. We can say all that. And maybe for the first few, it is true. But by the time you get to 5, 6, 7, realistically, what they are doing is 2 things. The first thing they do is, okay, where's the rug pull that we're going to do? And the second one is, how do we get to that with a long list of traps? That's all that's happened at this point. It's because that's what Saw has become known for, and it will bring in the bucks. And Saw is, I think, still the highest grossing horror franchise of all time. So you cannot deny it was working. It changed it up and it worked, and they did it incredibly successfully. And at a certain point, the people at the big ones was like, just churn out one a year. It's so much so, I think one of the adverts for like 5 or 6 in the UK had some voiceover narration going, if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. It became a tradition. It became a staple. They churned it out. But we can throw all these academic theories on them. And yes, for 1 or 2 of the first ones, yes, it's an idea. Realistically, by the end, they were just an excuse to chop some limbs off. And we can't deny that. I will not defend that. I still find them amusing because I like watching the ridiculous storyline and how stupid it is as a creative writing student myself, Like that's my niche, that's my area, but it is ridiculous and stupid by the end, and it is just an excuse to have limbs chopped off and burned to face off and all that kind of stuff. And I can't defend them.
Yeah, and by the way, the book I used was Torture Porn in the Wake of 9/11. That is by Aaron Michael Kerner. So if you have access to that book through a library, read it. Otherwise, don't bother looking it up. It's not that interesting.
Yeah, look at us trying to get actual academic theory into this. Into Saw.
All right. Well, do we have any final thoughts on Saw? Kieran, Sam.
I saw them all.
Yeah. See Saw if it's your kind of thing. If not, then don't.
Well,
If not, then don't.
I was
It's-
gonna
it's-
Where do you
say,
think the next one's going to go?
It's an acquired taste, definitely, as even by standards of kind of horror franchises.
I describe them a bit like Final Destination in that it's just a horror movie cartoon, and I
Yeah.
think if you view it that way, it's a lot less visceral,
Yeah.
and it's them having fun. It's a dark sense
Yeah.
of humor, but it's the creators having fun.
yeah. And for me, I mean, it is what it is. It's another horror franchise, and there are ones I like more. 1, 2, and 3, like I'll watch those anytime they're on TV. But I said 4 isn't that bad compared to 7, but I mean I'm not gonna sit there and watch that one. I don't care that much.
I think those you watch if you're playing like a drinking game with your mates. I've always
Yeah.
thought you
If
should
you're-
take
if you're
one every time
binging
there's a
them.
plot. If you take one every time take a drink every time there's a plot twist, and take one every time that makes a plot hole, because it's a great time and you'll be wasted.
Sam, did we have any
because-
listener questions?
No, not for this one. No.
Damn you, Greg,
Unfo-
and the other guy.
And Liam. Unfortunately,
Thank you.
no. My group of friends, they're either not horror fans or they're not horror fans who like this series. So no.
And I don't have any friends, so
I mean, my wife was very happy we were doing Saw and that I had to watch a Saw movie. And she was like, oh, let's watch 6 too, since that leads in. Nope. Nope, I'm only watching 1.
admittedly, 6 is one of the better out of 10.
It looks great. The 6. I love the hellish lighting, and anything with like acid is always particularly nasty, and there's a particularly nasty acid.
And it
trap
does
in
have one of the best tracks, which is the shotgun carousel.
yeah, that's
Hey,
great as well.
Kieran, did I hear you call Saw 1 a psychological thriller, by the way? Or just a thriller? I think I heard you say thriller in regards to it.
I think I'd call it a pot boiler. I think James Bond has referred to it as a pot boiler in an interview somewhere. It's a violent detective thriller.
Yes.
Which can also be a horror movie.
Well,
in
and
the same
that's
way
how
that
we
Silence of the
know-
Lambs.
That's how we know it's the best one, is because it's a thriller and not a horror film. So
Yeah, it's somewhat more reputable.
we are done talking about Saw for now. Maybe we'll do another Saw analysis. Who knows? But until then, Sam, Kieran, where can people find you online?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Film Magazine, where I like I said, I did rank all of the Saw franchise. So check out that list and feel free to disagree with me, because I don't think I've ever met a Saw fan who has the exact same order of kind of films. I think that they're generally agreed. Like probably the first 3 are pretty good, but beyond that, it's like it's luck of the draw, really. I think everyone like.
Can you give me a clickbait title preview of it? I'll do it. Number 3 will shock you. All right,
More ways than one.
Kieran.
So I'm K Judgmental across the various webs. And obviously on TFM Film Magazine. I've recently went and saw The Exorcist Believer. I suffered so you don't have to. And then ranked all the Exorcist films because I looked and couldn't believe that nobody had done it. Probably for good reason, because they saw the second one and went, yeah, we're going to ignore the fact that everything else existed. Which amazingly, coming into last week, Exorcist 2 obviously stars Richard Burton. And it is very upsetting. Also, upsetting the fact that James Earl Jones is in that in the same year that he came out with Star Wars. And let's be honest, we know which one should have been the better movie, by all accounts. But yeah, and I'll be doing stuff in the upcoming weeks and months and years and decades and probably centuries. And then putting out things in 300 years' time that I've written now, but are going to retcon later on as a result of the franchise.
Yeah, and you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. I have some horror movie lists and ranked stuff and whatever from the past. I have some upcoming Scorsese stuff for the present/future, however you want to look at that. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, you can read the film magazine. You can donate to us if you don't want to buy stuff. If you do want to buy stuff, our Redbubble link is below. I guess none of us are wearing the shirts, but Sam does have his phone case as always. And
Yeah, I think my shirt's in the wash. I will get it done for another time.
yeah, we can always use the support because that is how we keep the site online through the hard work, passion, sweat of our editor, Joe, and the amount of money that we get that covers the costs. So please help us out. We are an independent magazine. We don't use ChatGPT or other AI to do the work for us. We believe in the author in terms of the writer, the individual essayist or ranker or whatever. Big proponent of that and not computers. So that is it.
Essentially, give us money or we will die, which sounds very much like a saw trap.
Yes.
The one that we are in, not you.
My body
even
is
like
slowly
like
being twisted.
4, 5, and 6, it's more like not live or die, make your choice. It's make them live or die, make your choice. So imagine you're in like Saw 5 or 6, and we're in the trap, and we want you to save us. So give us money, please.
Exactly. All right. And thank you for listening or watching, and goodbye.